Often named the most successful predators on Earth, dragonflies make me appreciate that I'm not bug-sized. Or fish-sized for that matter. If you've ever seen a dragonfly in the wild and had the time to take a good look at it, you would see a long-bodied insect in beautiful hues of colors, with 4 wings and large compound eyes. But while they're beautiful to us, they're an airborne terror for anything that is unlucky enough to be considered their prey. When dragonflies chase their next meal, they rarely miss. And even underwater, you're not safe. Dragonfly nymphs might be even scarier than their adult forms. But what makes them such successful hunters? How do they catch and eat fish in their nymph state? What is going on with their weird mating rituals? And what happened to the massive dragonflies that lived millions of years ago? Before pterosaurs, before bats, and before birds, we think the first animal to fly was something like dragonflies. And they were massive. Meganeura are extinct insects that lived about 300 million years ago, so even earlier than the dinosaurs. They were closely related to and resembled dragonflies and damselflies. These flying insects had a wingspan of 75 centimeters, so they were only a little bit smaller than a modern-day crow, making them one of the largest flying insect species ever. One theory about how they even managed to grow this big was that oxygen levels used to be a lot higher then than they are nowadays. This way they had enough oxygen to supply such a large body. But very recently a study by an international team of researchers has provided strong evidence refuting this long-held theory. The team, led by Edward Snelling, used electron microscopy to assess how body size affects the number of tracheoles in flight muscles. Tracheoles are extremely fine air-filled branches, and they are essential because, unlike vertebrates, insects do not use their blood to transport oxygen. This means that these tracheoles are used for the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide through diffusion. The researchers found that the space occupied by the tracheoles in the flight muscles was only about 1% or less, and this observation holds for massive extinct animals like Meganeura. This suggests that the flight muscles of insects are not limited by atmospheric oxygen, because they could easily add more tracheoles in the muscles since they take up this little space. Some scientists don't agree and say that the oxygen flow in other parts of the body may still be limited, so the theory of oxygen-limited size in insects is not dead yet. Regardless, this new data shows that diffusion in the tracheoles of the flight muscles is not the limiting factor, and scientists will have to look elsewhere for why these giant insects existed. One other theory is that they were able to grow so big because there was no aerial predators at that time, since birds hadn't evolved yet. But when the birds evolved, it was suddenly more advantageous to be smaller and more agile to avoid being eaten. Still though, as of now, we don't have a definite answer of why they grew so big, so we just have to make do with the theories that exist. Nowadays, dragonflies are a lot smaller, with the largest by wingspan being the giant petal tail. They can reach wingspans of nearly 17 centimeters, or 6.7 inches for my Americans out there, and although that's a pretty big insect, it's nowhere near the extinct Meganeura. Dragonflies belong to the order of Odonata, and they are not to be mistaken with their close relatives, the damselflies. Damselflies are very similar in body plan, but usually a little bit lighter in the build. They also fold their wings when they're resting, while dragonflies hold them flat and away from the body. Now I'm guessing that you want to know more about that absolute monstrosity that caught and ate that fish in the beginning of the video. That was the nymph of the dragonfly. Let's take a look at their life cycle to understand what that actually means. Dragonflies are hemimetabolic insects, which basically means that they gradually develop with 3 different stages: the egg, the nymph, and the adult stage. These groups go through gradual changes, so they don't have a pupal stage like butterflies, for example. If you've ever seen a dragonfly that was repeatedly dipping half of its body into the water, it was probably a female that was releasing eggs every time the abdomen was submerged. And this is the point in the life cycle of dragonflies where we reach these absolute savages. A big part of a dragonfly's life is spent as a nymph underwater. They breathe through gills in their rectum, and they can also propel themselves forward by suddenly expelling water from the same opening. So basically they can breathe through their booty and use it as a jetpack. Dragonfly larvae have 6 legs just as the adults, but they don't have wings yet, since they would serve no purpose underwater. What they do have, however, is an extendable, hinged jaw that can shoot out in an instant and catch prey, which is mostly other insect larvae, worms, snails, tadpoles, or sometimes even small fish. The hinged jaw, also called a labium, is a toothed mouthpart similar to a lower mandible, and it is normally folded and held before the face. And like I said, they can extend and retract it rapidly to catch whoever is unlucky enough to be in front of them. This nymph stage of dragonflies lasts up to 5 years in larger species and between 2 months and 3 years in smaller species. In this period, the nymphs molt anywhere from 6 to 15 times, meaning that they shed their exoskeleton so they can grow. When they are ready for metamorphosis into the adult, they stop feeding and make their way to the surface, usually at night to avoid predators. The nymph then stays stationary with its head out of the water while its respiratory system adapts to breathing air, since, you know, they breathe through their booty. When this adaptation is done, it climbs up a plant and anchors itself firmly in a vertical position with its claws. Here, the metamorphosis to the adult begins. The exoskeleton begins to split at a weak spot behind the head, and the adult dragonfly can start to slowly crawl out of it. This process can take anywhere from 2 to 3 hours, and when the dragonfly finally emerges, most of its tissue is still pretty soft, so this is also the time when they are especially vulnerable to predation by birds. Most species of dragonfly have an adult lifespan of only about 5 weeks, and some species only live for a few days, but that doesn't make the adult stage of dragonflies any less impressive. As the body and wings harden off, they can begin their first hunts, and then they quickly develop into absolute horrors of the sky. When hunting, adult dragonflies have a success rate between 90 and 97%, meaning that most of their attempted hunts end in a success. Compare that to the lion's success rate of 30% and you see how impressive this number is. This makes them the species with the highest hunting success rate in the animal kingdom. But how are they so effective at hunting? The answer is a combination of their evolutionary adaptations, including their great eyesight and powerful flight. They can't hear and have a very limited sense of smell, so their eyes are essential for navigating the world. And boy, do they have eyes! If you take a closer look at their eyes, you'll find that they're a tightly packed mosaic of units called ommatidia. These are basically clusters of photoreceptor cells surrounded by support and pigment cells, and larger numbers of these make up the compound eyes that we see in dragonflies and other arthropods like insects, crustaceans or millipedes. And dragonflies have about 30,000 of these lenses per eye. Each ommatidium points in a slightly different direction and has its own lens. Dragonflies also have 3 tiny, very sensitive eyes on the front of their head. Because of this, they have a near 360-degree field of view. They can simultaneously see behind, above, below and to either side. These insects also probably see light and color very differently than we do. While we have 3 proteins in our eyes that are associated with color vision, dragonflies have up to 30. All of this begs the question, how do they process all of this visual information coming in at the same time? Although their brains are tiny, they're perfectly adapted to a life in the air and a life of predation. They can process up to 200 images per second. Compare that to our 30 to 60 images per second, and it becomes clear that dragonflies experience time a lot different than we do. And some people think they might experience it in slow motion, but that's not really confirmed. This gives them a reaction time of only 30 milliseconds. So the whole process of seeing a fly, identifying it as prey, taking off and catching it can happen in the same time it would take us to simply react in any sort of way. The second adaptation that makes them so successful at hunting is their ability to fly. In all other flying insects, the wing muscles are attached to the thorax and deform it. Since the wings are extensions of the thoracic exoskeleton, the deformations of the thorax also cause the wings to move. In dragonflies and damselflies, we see a completely unique way of flying. The flying muscles of Odonata insert directly at the base of the wings. This allows them to operate each wing independently, and it explains their great agility in the air. They are very agile flyers capable of highly accurate aerial ambush with speeds from 35 km per hour up to 60 km per hour. And some of them even migrate across oceans. If that wasn't enough, they can fly in any direction and change direction suddenly. all because of their direct flight muscles. Combining all of this, adult dragonflies hunt on the wing using their exceptional eyesight and great flight. They are almost exclusively carnivorous, eating a large variety of insects and even other dragonflies. In situations where chasing the prey directly seems inefficient, they can also predict the flight path of their prey and then intercept it to catch them. Once they are close enough to their prey, they trap them with their spiny legs and then consume them using their strong mandibles. If you've ever seen a dragonfly outside, chances are that you've seen two of them connected in a heart-like shape, flying around or sitting perched up somewhere. And maybe you were wondering what was going on there. This brings us to their very unusual reproduction ritual. Mating in dragonflies is a complex, precisely choreographed process. Male dragonflies are very territorial, so first they have to attract the female to their territory, while also driving off other rival males. When he is ready to mate, he transfers sperm from his primary genital opening to his secondary genitalia near the base of the abdomen. Using the claspers at the end of his body, the male then attaches himself to the head of the female. The female then curls her abdomen downwards and forwards under her body to pick up the sperm from the male's secondary genitalia. And this is the position where you might have seen them in their heart-like shape. Since female dragonflies mate with multiple males, it is only the last male that will be able to fertilize the eggs. Because of this, males have barbs on their genitalia to scoop out the sperm of other competing males. Yikes. The male then sometimes stands guards and chases off any other male attempting to mate with his partner, until the female has laid her eggs. The eggs are laid close to the water or into the water, like I said earlier. And from there, the life cycle begins all over again. In the course of doing research for this video, I was blown away many times by their genius design and adaptations that allow them to dominate not only in the air but also on the water. So the next time you're outside and happen to see a dragonfly, take a moment to observe these absolute marvels of evolution and appreciate that they are as small as they are today.